So I just want to welcome everyone to our afternoon session. From the Valley to the Summit, developing inclusive and mission-driven strategic planning for your organization. And we have Nicole Pretry here. I got it. And Julie Jennings as well, who will be presenting for us today. And we just want to welcome you all. And we also want to thank Cedar Community for being a sponsor for the sessions this afternoon.
Awesome. Welcome. Thank you. I don't know. I guess I'll talk up here. You can hear me, right? If I use my mom voice.
Right? Whatever you're comfortable.
I'm a free-range speaker, so I don't like standing behind a podium. But
do you want me to try and advance for you if you're going to free-range it?
I'll be all right.
All right.
So, fun fact: does anybody know what Maddie Silk stands for? We're in the Maddie Silks room. I looked it up because that's what I do. On this International Women's Day, she was one of the leading businesswomen of the old West, late 1800s, early 1900s. She was a madam, and she was one of the strongest businesswomen apparently in the old West. So, Maddie Silks.
There we go.
All right. And one of the few businesses women could probably actually own back then.
Yeah, it's all
So-
women.
And a room full of women.
That's right. So that was my fun fact for the day. I was like, Maddie Silks. I knew it had to be a name. So we were here to talk a little bit about, we went through a process at Cedar Community. For those of you who don't know who we are, quick commercial. We are a multi-site continuing care organization in West Bend, Wisconsin. We have 5 campuses. We serve about 900 residents, and we have about 400 staff members altogether. We have been around since 1953, so this is our 70th anniversary year as an organization. I have the privilege of serving as only the 4th actual CEO of the organization in 70 years, and the first woman. So, and Julie, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right. So I serve Cedar Community as the Vice President of Spiritual Care and Well-Being. I've been with the organization for not quite 5 years. It'll be 5 years in June. So fun fact, the last time CHHSM met in St. Louis, I was interviewing for my current position. So nice little homecoming next year in St. Louis.
All right. So, and I've been with Cedar for 11 years, but I've only been the CEO for about 2 years. So we were, as I took over as CEO about 2 years ago, one of the things we had not done in a very long time as an organization was strategic planning. We had kind of a whole new board of directors that had transitioned over the last 4 to 5 years, and an outgoing retiring CEO. So it was time to take a look at that. So when we started this process, we actually engaged an outside consultant to work with us on this, and she kind of helped us to really rethink how we did this, and we thought it was pretty unique. Maybe not. Guess you'll see based on what we say. But we wanted to share a little bit more about how we did that. So when I was doing this original strategic planning presentation to our board of directors, I actually started with a picture of my then 15-year-old daughter behind the wheel of the car. She was going through driving at that time, and I'm like, she keeps looking ahead. She doesn't look in her rearview mirror a lot. And then I was thinking about it, and a lot of what we do as organizations, especially those of us who've been around for a really long time, it's, well, that's the way we've always done it. And how do you break that cycle, right? Of that's the way we've always done it. So we really wanted to find the right direction, where we were going, and obviously we're in very changing environments. We have very challenging environments, and how do we change that conversation of, but that's how we've always done it. So, and obviously strategic planning is a roadmap for organizations to really figure out where they're going and how they're going to get there. So one of the things that's a component to that as well is to review your mission, vision, and value statements. That's usually a part of that, and we did that as well, so we'll kind of talk a little bit about how we did that too as an organization as a part of this overall process. So looking ahead, where my daughter was always looking, right, down the road, we need to have a clear sense of where we're going. And one of the reasons for that is because that makes sure that everybody in our organization is on the same page, right? Everybody's working toward the same goals. And one of the things that we did, and I'm a total, I don't know if you guys know who Simon Sinek is, but I'm a Simon Sinek nerd. And his books start with why. And so that's what I really encouraged and really kind of started us with, what is our organizational why? And that had to be the foundation of where we started this process in terms of how we went on that journey. So, many of us were here to come here. So where do you start with strategic planning? So there's really a process, starting out with where you are, sort of that legacy and that mission, right? Because that's going to be always the important part of who you are as an organization and that foundation for where you start. And then you develop your objectives. 3 to 5 years on average, strategic objectives. I like to say that the strategic planning process kind of has 3 levels, the objectives, the goals, and then the tactics. The objectives is where you want to keep your board of directors, 40,000 feet, right? If you have boards that like to get in operations, like to get in the weeds, strategic planning is a good way to pull them out of that. So, you determine where you are, you develop your objectives. Then from that point, we developed our plan, which is the objectives typically 3 to 5 year horizon. Then we developed our annual plan based on those objectives so that we developed then strategic goals based on the objectives. And then from there, we developed the tactics on how we achieve those goals. So objectives, goals, tactics is kind of how we tiered it, if you will. It's a good way to kind of keep that in mind. And the tactics is where you also develop your measurements, right? Your KPIs. How are you going to be reporting this, and what's your dashboard going to look like reporting back to your board of directors? So one of the things that we don't include in our strategic objectives, our strategic planning, your everyday basic business expectations. So you're not going to see your budget numbers, you're not going to see your census goals or client goals, debt covenants, compliance, quality metrics, QAPI for those of us in the senior living world, all those things. I'm a poker player, that's the ante, right? That is what is expected of us every single day. That is not a strategic objective. That is an every single day business goal, expectation. So some of the things that are really tough about this though, is if you have very tactical, very analytical board members or team members, they have a really hard time wrapping their head around this. We had one board member in particular and one executive team member in particular who really struggled with this. But why is the budget not an objective? It's a goal. It's a baseline expectation that we meet our budget. It's a baseline expectation that we do this. So that can be really challenging for people to really kind of wrap their head around. So I think when you're starting this process, it's really good to sort of level set that expectation of what does it look like from those 3 levels, right? Again, the objectives, the goals, and the tactics. So, and I think I turn it over to Julie from here.
So how many of you were in the last session in the big room? So my heart started beating a little bit faster when Bethany talked about walking in the room and saying something like, I don't know what you all think you know about governance, but you can just forget it right now. And I started imagining, what would that be like at our next board meeting? That could be really, really fun. Any other weedy boards out there? Any struggles with that? Weedy,
Trying to keep them in the air.
Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes that can be a really heavy lift, as Nicole was alluding to. And so I don't know, those of you who have those kinds of boards, what your experience with strategic planning with them has been like. But in the past, before we tried this new thing, we often had the board telling us what they thought our objectives ought to be and where we should be heading and where our energy should be invested and what our goals should be, what we should be moving toward, what obstacles we needed to get out of our way, and then assessing the organization to kind of figure out what our capacity for that was, and then finally to develop our goals and objectives, right? And those kind of key tactics, as Nicole was mentioning. So with this new approach that we took in this last cycle of strategic planning, we did a little inversion of that. And we actually started out with the executive leadership coming together, nice little retreat setting, and away from all those day-to-day things that will pull your mind off of strategic planning, and started with the assessment of the organization. What are our priorities? And we also thought about our vulnerabilities and opportunities, and focusing in on what our goals would be for the next 3 to 5 years with our own perspective. And so we then took those kind of goals and that background for the conversation that we had had, we, the ones who were most aware of what was going on in the industry and also familiar with our organizational capacity, and we took all of that to the board and asked for their input at that stage in the game. So as Nicole said, the consultant that we were working with at the time also guided those conversations with the board.
Okay. So one of the first steps we took, how many times have you all done SWOT analysis? Right? Everybody's done a SWOT. We didn't do a SWOT. We did a SOAR. So this is much more mission-oriented, it's more purposeful, and it's more aspirational versus a SWOT, a threat, right? You know, what are your threats? No, you know, what are our aspirations? And how do we know, you know, how are you measuring that? Because, you know, what gets measured gets done. Doesn't get measured, it's a little squishy. Strategic planning can be squishy, but this helps to kind of bring it all together. So what we did was we asked all of our leadership, our executive council members, and then also our board of directors. We did engage the board at this level as well, because we didn't want to just say, you know what, we'll come to you with a strategic plan. You don't want to do that either. So this was a way to engage them early on in the process as well. And we asked each of our board members to complete a SOAR analysis of our organization, as well as our executive council members. Our executive council members are myself and all of the vice presidents of our divisions. So we started there, and from that point, then based on what Julie was telling you, so after we developed that, then we kind of had this meeting with the board where we went through all of kind of what we're talking with you about. What we did was we made an ask of our board, a very specific ask. This is the exact same slide that I actually had in that board presentation. And it said, you know, what we're asking of you today in this strategic planning process. Help us focus on our why. Guide us with your input and your expertise on the how, so then we can develop the what. So in other words, all that input, first we establish our why, which was the next part of what we're going to talk about a little bit, because that was really the key to what we went through in transformation as an organization. How do we get there? That's that strategic component of it, right? Those strategic objectives. And then we can figure out those tactics and measure how we get there as an organization, and then report it back to you as a board. So we try to be very specific to them about what exactly we were asking them to do with us in that strategic planning meeting. So, because giving them very specific direction is good. And so then, starting with why. So now I'm going to go to my Simon Sinek geek out, right? So we actually played, this is obviously, if you want to watch the whole thing, it's a fantastic video. But I'm just going to play like a 5-minute snippet of it, but it's kind of really the crux of where we went with our board. And I've watched it 100 times, and I still love it every single time I watch it. The audio is not great, but that's because it's from like 2008, believe it or not. So, but I'm going to play it for you.
I call it the golden circle. Why, how, what? This little idea explains why some organizations and some leaders are able to inspire where others aren't. Let me define the terms really quickly. Every single person, every single organization on the planet knows what they do, 100%. Some know how they do it, whether you call it your differentiating value proposition or your proprietary process or your USP. But very, very few people or organizations know why they do what they do. And by why, I don't mean to make a profit. That's a result. It's always a result. By why, I mean what's your purpose? What's your cause? What's your belief? Why does your organization exist? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? And why should anyone care? Well, as a result, the way we think, the way we act, the way we communicate is from the outside in. It's obvious. We go from the clearest thing to the fuzziest thing. But the inspired leaders and the inspired organizations, regardless of their size, regardless of their industry, all think, act, and communicate from the inside out. Let me give you an example. I use Apple because they're easy to understand and everybody gets it. If Apple were like everyone else, a marketing message from them might sound like this. We make great computers. They're beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? Meh. And that's how most of us communicate. That's how most marketing is done, that's how most sales is done, and that's how most of us communicate interpersonally. We say what we do, we say how we're different or how we're better, and we expect some sort of behavior, a purchase, a vote, something like that. Here's our new law firm. We have the best lawyers with the biggest clients. We have, we always perform for our clients, do business with us. Here's our new car. It gets great gas mileage. It has, leather seats. Buy our car. But it's uninspiring. Here's how Apple actually communicates. Everything we do, we believe in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. We just happen to make great computers. Want to buy one? Totally different, right? You're ready to buy a computer from me. All I did was reverse the order of the information. What it proves to us is that people don't buy what you do, people buy why you do it. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. This explains why every single person in this room is perfectly comfortable buying a computer from Apple. But we're also perfectly comfortable buying an MP3 player from Apple, or a phone from Apple, or a DVR from Apple. But as I said before, Apple's just a computer company. There's nothing that distinguishes them structurally from any of their competitors. Their competitors are all equally qualified to make all of these products. In fact, they tried. A few years ago, Gateway came out with flat-screen TVs. They're eminently qualified to make flat-screen TVs. They've been making flat-screen monitors for years. Nobody bought one. And Dell came out with MP3 players and PDAs. And they make great quality products, and they can make perfectly well-designed products, and nobody bought one. In fact, talking about it now, we can't even imagine buying an MP3 player from Dell. Why would you buy an MP3 player from a computer company? But we do it every day. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. The goal is not to do business with everybody who needs what you have. The goal is to do business with people who believe what you believe. Here's the best part. None of what I'm telling you is my opinion. It's all grounded in the tenets of biology, not psychology, biology. If you look at a cross-section of the human brain, looking from the top down, what you see is the human brain is actually broken into three major components that correlate perfectly with the golden circle. Our newest brain, our Homo sapien brain, our neocortex, corresponds with the what level. The neocortex is responsible for all of our rational and analytical thought and language. The middle two sections make up our limbic brains, and our limbic brains are responsible for all of our feelings, like trust and loyalty. It's also responsible for all human behavior, all decision-making, and it has no capacity for language. In other words, when we communicate from the outside in, yes, people can understand vast amounts of complicated information like features and benefits and facts and figures. It just doesn't drive behavior. When we communicate from the inside out, we're talking directly to the part of the brain that controls behavior, and then we allow people to rationalize it with the tangible things we say and do. This is where gut decisions come from. Sometimes you can give somebody all the facts and the figures, and they say, I know what all the facts and details say, but it just doesn't feel right. Why would we use that verb? It doesn't feel right. because the part of the brain that controls decision-making doesn't control language. And the best we can muster up is, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Or sometimes you say you're leading with your heart, or you're leading with your soul. Well, I hate to break it to you, those aren't other body parts controlling your behavior. It's all happening here in your limbic brain, the part of the brain that controls decision-making and not language. But if you don't know why you do what you do, and people respond to why you do what you do, then how will you ever get people to vote for you or buy something from you, or more importantly, be loyal and want to be a part of what it is that you do?
So, your mission, why you do what you do, right? How do you explain your mission to people? Because that's kind of fuzzy too sometimes, right? So, what I wanted to do was forward this.
Well, while you're looking, I just want to say it's really interesting that while we're here and I ask people about, so what are you a part of? What do you guys do there? And they are giving me the, oh, well, we do retirement housing.
Right.
Or, oh, well, we're a home for children with disabilities. And I'm like, it
Why?
takes 5 minutes till I get their why out of them.
Right.
But
Well, we're gonna work on that.
What else? I mean, so there's more. There's
Right.
got to be
Right.
more. Where's the passion?
Right.
I mean, somehow we need to train
Yeah.
or get
Especially
people
those
to
of us-
be embodied enough
Yep.
about the why that when somebody says, what do you do at your organization? The why comes out instead of the...
Especially those of us in the faith-based space sometimes.
I know.
We struggle with that, right?
That's where your power comes from.
So what's your why? So I was going to give you 2-3 minutes to think about it and maybe write down your organization's why from your perspective. So I'm going to give you a couple minutes. Paper? Can you paper? What? Oh, you already know what it is? Oh, she's got it.
Type it in your notes.
That's right. Okay, so hang on to that why, because we're going to come back to it. But Julie's going to talk a little bit more about, she's going to dive a little bit more back into our process and something else we had kind of going on at the same time.
Yeah. So when we were embarking on this strategic planning process, we were also engaged in an organizational assessment of our strengths around and our opportunities for fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging at Cedar Community. So the board of directors had authorized the creation of a DEI task force that was taking a very comprehensive look, and at the recommendation of the task force, we retained a consultant to kind of guide us on that process as we engaged not only a look kind of at our organization, just the business practices or the team member perspective, but also the perspective from our residents and some of our family members and some of our business partners and just as many stakeholders as we could include in that process. And so these two undertakings kind of had this point of intersection in our conversation. And that really came into view when we started, as Nicole said, we started taking a look at our mission, vision, and values. And so just kind of high level, what are we talking about when we talk about mission, vision, and values? So first of all, our mission is what summarizes an organization's purpose, right? And what you can see on screen there is what Cedar Community's mission statement was when we were going through the organizational assessment of inclusion and belonging, and also the strategic planning process. And the vision statement will define where an organization wants to go in the future, right? And so again, you can see what our vision statement was. And organizational values are those core beliefs or principles that can help guide the organization toward its vision and help fulfill or manifest its mission. And I think it's fair to say we were actually pretty proud of our mission, vision, values. And we, like probably other folks here in the room, had them on our website, and quite honestly, we would get a whole lot of positive feedback about that. Like, I love those values, and what a great mission. But we began to ask ourselves, are our mission, vision, and values inclusive? And do they actually communicate our why? So, for example, is our community only a place in which people live with dignity and purpose? Or do we want these things for the people who work in our community also? What about our community-based services like home health and hospice, through which we may be providing services for people who don't live on one of our campuses? What does our mission reveal about that? And what message does our mission statement communicate to the non-Christian people in our midst or considering our services? So we really begin to unpack what we mean, not just what we meant, but what we continue to mean when we say we model Christ's love. And what we realized was we're not espousing a particular set of doctrinal beliefs about a salvific figure. Instead, we are calling upon the example the historical Jesus gives us of how we might regard and treat each other and live and work together. So specifically, that historical Jesus practiced compassion and empathy, grace and kindness, hospitality and justice, empowerment and engagement. And, as we've heard in some of our keynotes and other sessions, Jesus consistently demonstrated these practices to those who were excluded by their communities, affirming their dignity and worth and welcoming and including them. So it gets a little wordy, this slide here, but what's up there now are some of the key ways we see these practices lived out in our organization. So we had rich conversation about this with all parties involved in that. Our board was actually very engaged in this conversation with us, and we decided to make a slight revision to our mission statement. So our mission now currently is this: to model Jesus' love by creating life-enhancing relationships, services, and environments.
Thanks, Julie. So the other part of that whole thing too is your vision and value statement. Your vision, again, is supposed to be aspirational. Ours was to live where people live with purpose and dignity. And like Julie said, do we really want that just to be about the people who live there, or do we want it to be about our team members who work there, about our families who are a part of our community, of our greater community, and our business partners? So, and then values, another Simon Sinek nugget. Values should never be nouns. They should always be verbs. Because true values, this is a direct quote from them, true values are how you act when you are at your natural best. So we wanted to help, and the other part of that too is that, values become your culture as an organization. So actually spelling that out, making them more than just words, making them verbs, making them actions. For example, honesty, that's not a value. Telling the truth is a value. Innovation is not a value. Looking at things and solving things differently is a value. So that's kind of where we started thinking about that. So as we went through this process, we didn't intend to really do this, but we kind of accidentally did this, and it was pretty cool. We actually took our vision and our values, and we didn't replace them per se, we evolved them. And we evolved them to now what we call our guiding principles and priorities. So when we started this process very back at the beginning, and I asked the executive council, we had this, our previous strategic plan had this like Acropolis pillar with like 7 pillars, and financial and human resources, and the foundation was the mission, and it's that typical and honestly, our team members had no idea what it meant. It didn't mean anything to them. So how do we dial this down to simplify it to a point where every single person in our organization, team members, residents, families, everybody that we touch understands exactly what we stand for? So first thing I asked them was, what are our priorities as an organization? So we developed, and we went through this, and I'm going to tell you that it was funny. So not funny, but not funny. Developing these guiding principles and priorities was a little painful too, because we literally argued, not argued in a bad way, argued in a good way over every single word that we did. I mean, we pulled these things apart. We laughed, we joked, we were like, there was laughter, there were tears, it was, yeah. But what we did was we came up with our priorities as an organization. We came up with 4 key priorities. Community, that started as residents. But we serve a lot more than residents in our organization. We serve families, we serve patients, we serve clients, we serve donors. We just have this. It's community, right? That's our name. That's why when we rebranded, we didn't change. We are Cedar Community. And people always say, but you have 5 campuses. Why aren't you Cedar Communities? Because we're one community. And we always correct people when they say communities, trust me. Team is pretty obvious. Quality. That's a pretty strong priority, especially in the healthcare world, right? We have a lot of things we're held to account in the quality world. And responsibility. We have a lot of responsibility. We have fiduciary responsibilities. In our organization, we're blessed with natural resources. We have over 550 beautiful acres and lake frontages and things of that nature. I mean, we have a lot of things to really be responsible for. So then we wrote down, we started with the priorities, and then we said, why? Why are these priorities? And you can read those. I'm not going to read them all up for you exactly, but why quality? How does that look like? We challenge ourselves to be exceptional in everything we do. So those are broad, right? But that's the beginning. Then what we did was we talked about how. So remember the why, the how, and the what in the golden circle? How do we do this? And we developed these statements. These are our how statements. We do this by building respectful relationships, creating welcoming environments, and fostering well-being of body, mind, and spirit. And one of the things that we started doing too as we worked through this is we really worked to develop, and this is where we began to weave in the work of our DEI task force as well, to make sure that that inclusion was woven into these guiding principles and priorities as well. Creating the culture of purpose, excellence, and belonging. Those types of things.
So the priorities, the how, these are the priorities.
The priorities are community, team, quality, and responsibility.
And
These
how
are the
do those-
principles, these are our principles.
And how do they connect to the value?
So we don't have values, vision and values any longer.
Okay, got it.
We have a mission statement and we have guiding principles and priorities
Okay.
as an organization. And one of the things that we do about this is that,
Nicole, can I just go back to that question
Yeah.
for just a
Sure.
second? So one of the things that I would say is, if you remember how Nicole talked about values being verbs, that there is a little correlation and a little connection to that concept of values, and you see them here, you know, in like our responsibility is we steward our resources wisely. You know, that kind of action statement that represents that priority for us.
thank you.
Yep.
She articulated it better than I did. But this visual here, our guiding principles and priorities, has become the foundation of everything we do. Decisions we make, how we plan, how we communicate as an organization. And again, I want you to think back to that golden circle, the Simon Sinek's why, and his example of how Apple actually sells. So think about it this way. Here's the elevator speech. When somebody asks you, what does your organization do? At Cedar Community, we create a sense of community and nurture a culture of purpose and belonging while challenging ourselves to be exceptional in all we do. It's the why. We do this by building respectful and inclusive relationships, delivering compassionate, best-in-class programs and services, all while stewarding our resources wisely. How would you like to be a part of our mission? For residents, to recruiting team members, to talking to donors, that's your why. That's your golden circle. We all, in the senior living world, we've got restaurant-style dining, we got life enrichment programs, we've got healthcare services. Guess what? So does everybody else.
I know, it's like something.
How do you differentiate yourself in our world? This is how you differentiate, and this is how you talk to people about your organization. Not about your restaurant-style dining, not about your life enrichment programs and services. This is how we do it, and this is how we've really transformed how we talk about ourselves as an organization, internally as well as externally. When we shared this with team members, I did an all team member meetings and introduced this and talked about, this is the start, this was our starting point. Was not our intention to start with this, but this is kind of where we wound up. And from here is where we developed then, and there's a third level to this, which I didn't bring into this presentation today, but I'm happy to share it with you all if you ever want to see it. The third level is, was our corporate strategic objectives, right? So those 3 to 5 year objectives that we set based on these core guiding principles and priorities. And then from those strategic objectives, that was a 3 to 5 year horizon, then we developed our fiscal year 23 goals, right? And from there, our executive leaders took those goals and went to their teams and developed divisional goals and tactics on how we reach those goals. Yes?
So this is like a rebranding, almost.
I would say it's a culture rebranding as an organization. It's a cultural rebranding. One of the things I heard a lot when I took over was we've really stranded away from our mission as an organization and our culture, and we missed the part of that. So, but we don't want to. I didn't want to say, okay, well, we'll just go back to doing it the way we always did it, because we can't do that as an organization. We've got to move forward. But the way that you recruit team members in this current environment, and the way that you talk about yourselves to potential residents and to donors and to your community partners and the thing, this is how we had to really reframe that. So in a way, it was a rebranding. It wasn't our name, it wasn't our logo.
Right.
It was our philosophy, right?
So then
how we
how
talk.
much of your materials, your website, like how much of that shifted?
It's all shifting.
Okay, that's
It's
where
all
my mind
shifting.
is going.
Yep,
This is
yep. And in fact,
reframing is exactly what it feels like.
Exactly.
happening. It's like,
I have
we're still who we were, but we totally reframed
Yeah.
how we understand
And I kind of explained it to people, is we went back to the core of who we were as a faith-based, mission-driven, nonprofit organization. We didn't change who we were, we named it,
Yeah.
right? But as I tell everybody too on my team, it's not enough to just name it. We have to live it intentionally every single day as an organization.
I'm just gonna
Yeah,
jump in
Go
because
for it.
one of the reasons people said that, well, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, or if you have another perspective,
Okay.
right? Because there are multiple perspectives for a statement like, we've gotten away from our mission, right? But one of the reasons, particularly our team members would say that, I think, is because our former CEO did a lot of very hard work to remind our organization that we had to mind the margins. And so that really translates to a lot of people as, you don't care about mission anymore. You don't care about people, you just care about money. And I think one of the beautiful results or opportunities for us in this kind of reframing of like our why and communication of it is it's embedded right there for everyone to understand and begin to see their part in. Because none of those other things happen, as we all know, if we're not
Right.
minding that margin.
Yep, and I was gonna actually talk a little bit about that too.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay, no, I'm glad you jumped in. And I'll touch base a little bit on it toward the end, there's only a couple slides left actually, but I would say too that the other thing about this is that when you continually put this in front of your team members, we're actually in the process of remodeling right now, and we are very intentionally making this is kind of our standard graphic that we use in everything that we do now. We're putting this everywhere, right? Front of house, back of house. We want people to see it when they come in. We want guests to see it. We want families to see it. We want our team members to see it. We want it where they can continuously, because when you're making changes, but you're not explaining why you're making those changes, then you're getting no buy-in. So if you don't help your team and your residents understand why you're making changes, you might as well not even try. Because if they don't get it, they're gonna resist you at every turn. We just had a situation, it's kind of a side note, we just had a situation in Wisconsin where a CEO of a very large organization was fired by the board of directors after the residents went after him because he was changing the organization from a religious-based service model to a money-generating business model. He was doing the same things that we were all doing. He was diversifying revenue. He was looking at going into home and community-based services. He was doing the things he needed to do to make it a sustainable organization, but he never shared with them why he was doing it. So to the residents, you're no longer a Christian organization. You're no longer working through your mission. That's why this is so important to communicate on a regular basis. So, all right, so I was going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm going to let Julie take over the next section.
All right, so I just took a little quick look at the time too. So, and you said a couple more slides and I looked and it's like twice that. So
It's
I'm
4:45. Technically, it's 4:45.
Right, okay, great, never mind. I'm gonna slow that roll right back down. Spend all the time I was planning to kind of.
The video though.
Oh, well, we'll see.
We'll
Yeah.
see.
Okay, so I wanted to just, Nicole mentioned that we were very intentional about embedding kind of the language of inclusion and belonging in these guiding principles and priorities. But I just want to lift up that it's not just embedded in the words, like creating a place of belonging, right? It's embedded in other things also, like well-being, because and engagement, right? Because we know that when people do not feel included, they're less likely to engage. And if people don't feel like they have a place of belonging, then their overall well-being suffers. Right? We can just look, no belonging, no welcome, no engagement, isolation, loneliness, all kinds of health impacts because of those things, right? So, it's all connected for us. So just sort of a word about how we are talking about this inclusion and belonging and engagement and well-being. We are fostering a culture of inclusion and belonging, where everyone who lives at Cedar Community, works at Cedar Community, doing business with us, visiting one of our campuses, receiving services from us, knows that they are respected and welcomed, that their whole selves are honored, and that their unique gifts and experiences are celebrated and valued. And that's sort of the long way of saying that at Cedar Community, we don't just want you to be here, we want you to be you and know that you belong. So that's how we're beginning to message this with our team members. Particularly, Nicole and I have started doing a little tag team, kind of like this. So we're getting really comfortable with this kind of back and forth presentation style. But we do an onboarding session. It actually is the first session that our new team members receive when they come for their orientation. And we talk about this culture of inclusion and belonging, but also how we are striving to get there is, at least in one way, this is not the only way, but kind of back to that Simon Sinek video, actually, and how we make our decisions, how we engage in the world around us really is driven by how we feel inside. And all that, the services that you get, all that doesn't matter if you don't have this kind of or what matters most in all of that is how you are made to feel, right? Your experience of it really is determined by that as much as any of the other things that are going on. So we're using the language of empathy to talk about that a little bit. And okay, sometimes this presenter mode, confuses me, and it just happened right there, so sorry about that. What we try and get at is that empathy is sort of moving a little beyond just having a feeling about someone, right, or some situation. And so the work of empathy transforms those feelings that we have toward another person into a true connection that, what's happening? A true connection that we make with someone, all right? And then the empathy that we can develop within ourselves as we encounter others is fueled by compassion, right? And when we are driven by compassion, we do a much better job of creating meaningful relationships, deepening our understanding of one another, delivering better services, and supporting environments in which people can thrive. And so I don't know if you remember our mission statement, but relationships, services, and environments. Compassion is what fuels our mission. And I think that's really true for all of us, but this is our intentional way of like saying it and naming it a little in a little greater detail. The video is next. All right, so
Start a second. No, it won't start. You have to hit the shows up. It
Once
does
it
show
shows
up.
up. All right,
It just takes
so-
a minute.
We then stop talking in our onboarding session, which is kind of what we're going to do here as well. Maybe, maybe not. This is more than a second. Oh, it did.
Okay, we'll see. If not, I can pull it up afterwards too.
Okay.
It's a video we show in our actual
Yeah.
orientation session.
But it's really not loading for
It's
some
not
reason.
loading. We'll play it for you another time.
So,
Afterwards, we'll pull it
and,
up.
yeah, and if we run out of time,
We'll give you the link.
yeah. All right, so there. I'm
So
just-
that's okay, we're wrapping up pretty quick here too, so it'll be easier to go back to as well. I was just gonna see if it would reload. So really the bottom line is, what we do in the orientation sessions with all of our new team members, what we continually talk about in all of our communications, we have a quarterly magazine that we put out, and we've started actually focusing on one or more sometimes of those key priority areas in every single issue of the magazine. In fact, on the plane here this morning, I finished my article on team. So my focus for this quarter, which it's actually the April issue, is about team and why is that a priority for us and how are we continuing to manifest that as an organization. So really it starts with your mission, going all the way back, right, for us and for all of us. That's our legacy, right? Why did we start? Who are we? What are we doing? So the mission and our principles and priorities drive our process of inclusion and belonging as an organization, tying that into empathy and compassion and how we work together, how we work with our residents and our community partners. And that in turn informs our strategic goals and our strategic planning. So it's kind of all tied together. So we really started off thinking, okay, we're going to develop a cool strategic plan. And then we wound up developing guiding principles and priorities, which were like, okay, these are awesome, but now what do we do with these things, right? And then we're like, well, hey, we're doing this DEI work, and that needs to be woven into everything we do too. We can't just do it and say, okay, we're going to do X, Y, and Z programs a year, and that's going to cover our DEI. We need to embed it in everything we do. We actually just took one of our HR positions and morphed it into a belonging position whose sole focus is to work on retention, recruitment, celebration of our team members, inclusion and belonging for our team members, and eventually our residents as well. We're also going to start working on that more through our life enrichment programming. Yes?
Is there a reason you don't use diversity, the word diversity?
We do have a reason for that, and I will share that with you. So Julie can also share with her perspective as well. So we are in a geographical part of the country that is very non-inclusive. And we are getting more diverse every day. We are in a county that is incredibly politically charged. And we started this, when we started this process, we had a very, very negative, swift and negative backlash to what we were doing. And so what we did was we said, we don't want to stop this work, but we need to evolve it a little bit to help people understand why we're doing this work and why it's important. And believe it or not, one of the things that people were most upset about was, how dare you say we're not inclusive in belonging? We're very inclusive in belonging. Yeah, if you're white, 40, female, and heterosexual, sure. We're very inclusive in that respect. But we are trying to work from a perspective of, okay, we're not gonna throw, it was such a, I don't know, Julie can probably help me a little bit better on her wording of it. I'll let you step in.
That's enough.
Does that make sense to you? How about Julie can?
That's an accent.
I think that, one of the things that I would say is that, and one of the things that we're very clear about, is when you don't name that, right? Well, folks in our community are a little more willing to talk about our differences. They just don't really want to talk about our diversity,
Yeah.
right? Because diversity has been politicized and in some ways weaponized, right? That in our county, let me pull back on that and clarify. And so we're like, well, all right, let's lean into that. And then let's actually start talking about all of our differences. And so what I was gonna say is that when you take a word like diversity out of this presentation, and the language that's putting out there, it becomes, I think, much more imperative that you are very intentional about making sure that what you do to support inclusion and belonging is not targeting the majority, right? That lack real expressions of diversity, right? Because then it's just feel-good stuff, and it's not actually, what's that?
It's not reflective of the organization if you use a word that really doesn't describe what you look like.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say is that it doesn't make a difference for the people who don't already feel included or don't already feel like they belong, but are still there. So if you're not being explicit in what you're trying to include and what you're trying to create belonging for as you talk about it, then the actions that you take and the education you start to bring in have to be more explicit in that. Does that make sense?
And I would say too that we felt that kind of coming at it from this angle would, instead of that being, us being hijacked by that all the time in all of our conversations and what we were trying to accomplish, that we could work toward being more, using more words like diversity in our environments and things of that nature. So it was an interesting process to go through.
Well, one of the reasons I asked is because you said you used DEI. You said we have
did.
to put, but you're not. So equity's also missing from up there, and we don't need to go into it. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
Thank you for
Yeah,
answering.
nope, that's all right. So, yeah, it was an eye-opening process on both sides, I would say, of the issue for us. And so we're really working through that, and we're trying to still continue to be very intentional about moving through that process as best as we can. So,
Nicole, just
Yeah.
a quick question.
yeah.
Kind of tagging along in that same thing, do you feel that your board is aligned with where you're going?
Not all of them. Not all of them. I would say that for sure. So, yep. That's another challenge we face.
Yeah, and I guess for me, you have to be realistic in your starting place, and you have to kind of embrace the obstacles that are presenting themselves to you, and begin your journey with those obstacles, and hope that as you begin to move forward together, you can still be effective, or you can effect the change that's needed to move where you're trying to go.
Yeah. But those are good questions, very good questions. Thank you for asking. So this is really wrapping it up, but I'm going to go back to the continuous communication of what you're doing and your why is really the key to making it successful and to making it stick. And the other thing too is it's easy. A lot of organizations, they start with strategic planning, they come up with a great plan, they come up with their objectives, and then nothing ever gets done again. It has to be measured. So you have to come up with how you measure what you're doing, and then report that back, not just to your board, but report that back to your team members, report that back to your residents. Because again, if you keep them engaged and you keep them really focused on why you're doing what you're doing, mining that margin and that mission, it will be easier to do. And those conversations and those changes and those rate increases and all those things, they're never easy, but they get easier if the people understand why you're doing those things. So, that was it. So, I can go back and find that video if you'd like me to.
Are we getting a copy of that?
We can get you a copy of it. There is a copy in the presentation. We updated it slightly, so we'll make sure that George gets an updated copy of that to you all as well.
Because we can get to your PowerPoint through the app, right?
Correct.
George,
It's a little bit outdated. This is an example of one of our magazines, for example. And when we launched the Guiding Principles and Priorities, this was the article that did that.
Yeah, we did so Nicole and I kind of very intentionally coordinated our articles in that, oh, there you go,
Yep, next page.
next page. So Nicole really talked about that strategic process
And
and
then
our
we
why,
talked
and
about-
I really talked about our mission.
How we changed the mission statement and
yeah.
why we changed the mission statement.
Did you do this work yourself or did you hire an outside consultant?
We worked with an outside consultant.
Yeah, who was the consultant?
Stewart Leadership was the name of the organization that we worked with. And then if you're interested in seeing the empathy video, I'm happy to pull it up for you, but it's also really close to our end time, so it's up to you guys.
Any other questions for us, though, before that decision gets made?
You have about 6 minutes. I don't know how long it is.
Oh, it's only 4.5, I think.
Pull it up really fast. There's probably a
Commercial.
A commercial. No, I don't want a visual search.
I know you said you had a lot of kind of board folks not on board, but how was your executive leadership team or your top level staff with change?
I would say our leadership team, our executive council is very much on board with it. A lot of our team members are on board with it. We still have some work to do across that board. Where we're finding the biggest resistance, I'll be honest with you, is within our resident population. I think that's a generational thing as well.
Change.
But that's tough for them, a lot of them, so.
It's kind of interesting how this will affect board recruitment in the future. It's kind of like,
We have an opportunity in that area, so.
yeah, here we are. And
That we'll be
you need
taking
to embody
advantage
and
of.
align with this in order to be on
Yes,
the board.
yeah. When we kind of came at this at first, we kind of realized that, okay, I guess this is gonna have to be baby steps and really kind of continue to work our way into what this looks like in a bigger picture. So, yeah, it wasn't, we didn't realize it was gonna be quite the uphill battle as we faced.
You probably said, but how long did it take you to get here? When did you start? When you started? Was this your initiative?
Was that a year-long process?
About a year, yeah. Well, no, I would say it was probably about an 8-month process, so start to finish. So this is the video, this is the empathy video that we share with all new team members in our team member orientation. So it's about a little over 4 minutes.
show the same video at our onboarding for our
Yeah.
caregivers.
Yep, that's what we do for all team members.
Every day loves that.
Thank you all for coming.
Ah,
Any questions, I'll reach out to you.
Thank you all for your presentation. That was awesome. Thank you all for being here with us. And I think we have a short break. Next, there is a break, and then there's a reception starting at 5 o'clock. And that is sponsored by Beatitudes Campus in the Loft area.
Hey, Michelle.